Hello and welcome to Sarah's Stamp Retreat. Today we're going to be creating cards focusing on this really cute Cactus Cuties bundle. So we've got the stamp set and the coordinating punch. So let's use it to make some cards. So for my first card I'm going to use some simple stamping. I've also embossed a piece of gold foil sheet. So I've got a 5x5 inch Evening Evergreen card blank, so that's 5 inches by 10 inches scored and folded in half. And then I've taken a piece of gold foil sheet that's 4.75 inches square, so 4 3/4 inches on each side, and I've popped that through my die cutting machine in my embossing folder. And you'll see that I've got a line across the middle of that, and that's because the embossing folder isn't quite big enough. So what I've done is I've embossed half. I've actually embossed more than half. I've embossed probably 3/4, and then I've lined this up and embossed the other part. So this bit here is where the edge of the embossing folder has gone down that line, but you won't see it too much once the card is layered up. And I really love this embossing folder, so I wanted to use it even though it's not really big enough. That's the Hive 3D embossing folder. So you'll also see that because I've put it through my embossing folder a couple of times, this piece of cardstock isn't quite flat anymore. So I'm going to use my my tape on the back of it, tear and tape, just to kind of give it that bit of added stick. Because obviously if you use wet glue, there's a bit more movement, so it could kind of like pull itself off the card a little bit, but with the tape it kind of just sticks where you want it to. And you can see I'm kind of using the deboss side. There's this emboss side as well which you could use. And I've got this piece which measures 3 inches square and this one which measures 3 1/4 inches square. So that's the basic white and the evening evergreen. I'm going to use this one of the cactus stamps to just stamp on our basic white with some evening evergreen ink. Then I'm going to use this part of the punch, just punch a little pot from gold foil sheet. And I'm just going to use my glue to glue that on top. And I'm going to layer this onto the evening evergreen piece. So then I'm going to use this just a note stamp and my Versa marking. And I'm going to use my white embossing powder just to heat emboss that sentiment. So then I'm just going to turn my heat tool to level 2. So then I've got my sentiment. So I'm just going to layer these up. I'm going to pop some dimensionals behind here. And you see now I've got this on, the line that was down the middle as barely noticeable. So then I'm going to put some more dimensionals behind this. And I want to put 2 layers behind this end because that is going to go down here where there's no dimensionals. And then I want 1 layer at this end. And there we go, there's our finished card. Then for my second card, I've got a basic white DL card. So that measures 8 1/4 inches by 7 3/4 inches, scored and folded in half. And I've used thick basic white for that. I always use the thick basic white if I'm using white card blanks. So I'm just going to stamp the cactus that I used for the last one in Evening Evergreen in the middle, and then I'm going to use Calypso Coral to stamp a pot underneath it. And I use Rich Raspberry to stamp a pot next to it. And I just want to make sure that the pots look like they are on a level playing field. So I'm just going to lay this across here, just so that I can use it a bit as a guide to where the pot needs to go. And then I'll use Bumblebee on the other side to stamp the final pot. And then I'm going to take my Pizzazz ink. I'm going to use that for the final two cacti, just to stamp those in the pots. Because I think the stamping looks almost like stenciling with the white lines in, I've actually stamped the cacti a little bit above the pots just to kind of carry on that kind of imagery. So I've cut this down. I'm also just going to add this little flower in the Rich Raspberry onto here. So I've cut this down to 3.5 by 7 inches. So then this is 3 3/4 by 7 1/4 inches. And so I'm just going to glue those two layers together. And then I've got a basic white DL card, so that is 8 1/4 by 7 3/4 inches, scored and folded in half. And you can see that I was originally going to do this straight onto the card, but I decided that I wanted to add a layer in between. So all I'm going to do, rather than waste this card blank, is I'm just going to glue this onto the original card blank. As I always say, like, some things you do part way through, you might decide it's not coming out quite how you want it, but that doesn't mean it's complete waste. Don't chuck it in the bin. There's always ways of using things again. And I've been making cards for years and years and years, and things still don't come out the way that I want all the time. Now what I might do is just add this little hello in the Evening Evergreen ink onto that middle plant pot. So for this next card, I'm going to use some In the Wild DSP, and so I just thought I'd show you the DSP. So I'm going to use this piece, which I think goes really nicely with these cacti. But if I show you the rest of the DSP, you can see I don't have full sheets of all the pieces. So we're going to use some of this one for another card later. Then we've got this one with the tigers, with the leopard print on the back. Then we've got this one, that on the back. And we've got the leopards with that kind of graphic print on the back. And this one with this print on the back. So it's actually a really nice pack of papers, and I'm going to use it in this one because I think it goes really nicely with the cacti. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use it with this base and this cactus. I'm going to use one of my circle layering dies. You can see you get the scallops and these smooth edge ones in here. And you get 16 in the pack, so it's a really big pair. So I'm going to use this size, and I'm just going to cut a circle from the side there. So you can see now that I've got my A6 card blank. So this is made of thick Whisper white cardstock. So that's 8 1/4 inches by 5 7/8, scored and folded in half. This piece is 1/4 inch smaller. I'm just going to glue that to my card front. Now I'm going to use my Evening Evergreen ink. Just put that on here. Now I'm going to stamp the plant pot in yellow onto a spare piece of white cardstock. then I'm just going to cut around that with my scissors. It's a really easy shape to cut out. So then let's pop these behind there, some little dimensionals, and we can pop that on here. And I'm going to do some heat embossing. I'm going to use the Just a Note again this time. Some more embossing powder on that, so that's the white embossing powder. So it's melt that. So that's my little sentiment. I can pop some dimensionals behind. So that's that card completed. So then for my next card, I'm going to use a layout that I love to use for stamp sets that are quite blocky like this. And that is to stamp all over the background with lots of the different stamps. And just create a really nice background. So I'm using all the same colours, that's the bumblebee. And I'm going to use pear pizzazz on top of that. And on these kind of things, you always want to make sure that the print goes off the edges of the card, because it just doesn't look right otherwise. Now I use the Calypso Coral. I'm going to stamp that a little bit off the bottom. I'll stamp this one on top of it in the Evening Evergreen. And I can use this one in the Rich Raspberry. And put this one up here too. And I use the pear pizzazz again for this one. And then I'm going to cycle back through them, just adding some more in. Then I'm going to use the Hope Your Day is on Point sentiment. I'm just going to heat emboss that onto some Evening Evergreen cardstock. Let's pop on some of the white embossing powder. This is just a Stampin' Up white embossing powder, just in a tub to make it a bit easier. Let's heat that up. So I've cut that down. I'm just going to pop that onto my card. Use a few dimensionals for that. That's that card finished. And then for my final card, I've got a 5x5 inch Evening Evergreen card blank. I've got some of this paper that I showed you earlier from the In the Wow DSP. And I've got this piece of Evening Evergreen cardstock, which is 3¼ inches square, and this piece of basic white cardstock that's 3 inches square. So now I'm going to use a spare piece of basic white cardstock, and I'm going to use my Evening Evergreen ink, and I'm just going to stamp this onto it, and then I'm going to punch that out with my punch. And you'll notice that the punch punches slightly inside the edge, so you get a nice clean finish. And then I'm just going to stamp this little piece here as well. Let's punch that out too. And then I'm going to use Rich Raspberry. I'm going to use that for this little flower. I just need to chop off this bit in order to get that the right way in the punch. there's my little flower. And then I'll use the bumblebee to stamp this pot on. And then I can punch this out. I'm going to use that cute little hello stamp and the Evening Evergreen ink just to stamp along the edges of the square. Now I'm going to pop this on the diagonal, so I'm going to put this on top of here. So let's glue this back piece down. And then I'm going to put dimensionals into the pot. And dimensional under this piece. And then I'm just going to cut a little piece from the edge, just for behind the little flower. And then I'm just going to glue this onto my piece of Evening Evergreen card. And I'm going to add this on with some dimensionals. And I kind of forgot that I hadn't glued this piece onto the base card as well, so let's put that on too. And you never see it on my videos, but actually after my videos I always put just a 4 3/4 inch square piece of, in this case, basic white cardstock into the centre of here, just so that you've got something to write your message on. So now let's pop that on here. And that's that final card completed. So let's bring the other cards in. So there are all the cards we've created today. I really hope that you've enjoyed today's video. If you did, I'd appreciate you clicking like below. And you can also press subscribe if you'd like to see future videos. If you press the bell button and select all, then YouTube will also notify you when I have a new YouTube video available. All of the products that I've used for today's tutorial are listed in the description below, and there's also a host code there. So if you pop my host code into your basket before you check out, then I'll send you a free gift after the end of the month. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope to see you again soon.